What would you do if the people who destroyed your dreams ended up begging you for a job 15 years later? That's exactly what happened to Malcolm Rivers. But here's the twist. They had no idea he was coming. They walked into that boardroom expecting a normal Tuesday morning meeting. What they got was a reckoning, 20 years in the making. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about what happens when the kid everyone said didn't belong becomes the one who decides who gets to stay. If you're new to Top Core, hit that subscribe button right now because we tell the stories that show you the real America, the one where being smart and working hard isn't always enough, but where justice sometimes catches up to the people who thought they were untouchable. Let me take you back to where it all started. To a 12-year-old boy walking through iron gates he was never supposed to enter. Malcolm Rivers was 12 years old when he learned that intelligence wasn't enough. It was September, and the morning sun made Ashford Preparatory Academy look like something from a movie. Brick buildings covered in ivy, lawns so perfect they looked painted. Students walking around in blazers that probably cost more than his mother's monthly rent. Malcolm stood at the iron gates wearing a blazer from Goodwill and carrying a backpack his mama had bought on clearance 3 years ago. The acceptance letter in his pocket said he belonged here. The stares from every direction said something completely different. He was the scholarship kid, the only student from East Side public schools to earn a full ride to Ashford in 15 years. His mother, Patricia, had cried when that letter came. Real tears that mixed joy with something that looked a lot like fear. "Baby, this is your chance," she told him in their small apartment kitchen, gripping his shoulders so tight it almost hurt. "Your chance to get out of here, to be something more than what this neighborhood says you can be." Malcolm understood. At 12 years old, he already understood too much about what the world expected from a black boy growing up in subsidized housing with a single mother working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. Ashford Prep was supposed to be different, a place where being smart actually mattered, where merit was currency. He was wrong. "Is that the charity case?" someone whispered as he walked past. Malcolm kept his head up and his eyes forward. Don't react. Don't give them anything. Just get to class. Advanced mathematics was first period. Malcolm was good at math, better than good. Numbers made sense in a way that people never did. Numbers didn't care what color you were or where you came from. 2 plus 2 was 4 whether you lived in a mansion or a project. Mr. Whitmore looked up when Malcolm walked into the classroom. He was an older white man with gray hair and the kind of face that gave away nothing. "You must be our scholarship student. Malcolm, is it?" "Yes, sir." "Well, let's see if you can keep up." Malcolm felt those words settle in his chest. Not welcome. Not glad to have you. Just, let's see if you can keep up. He took a seat in the back row. 3 boys sat in front of him already laughing about something Malcolm wasn't part of. They looked like they'd been born in those expensive blazers, like they'd never had to prove they deserved to breathe the same air as everyone else. The tallest one turned around. Blonde hair, blue eyes, a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "I'm Bradford Hancock," he said. "That's Preston Caldwell and Jeremy Chen. You're the kid from the projects, right?" Malcolm's jaw tightened. "I'm from East Side." "Same thing." Bradford's smile got wider. "Don't worry, we don't bite. Much." Preston laughed like that was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. Jeremy looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. Mr. Whitmore started the lesson. Advanced algebra, concept that should have been challenging for 7th graders. Malcolm followed easily. This was the kind of math he'd been teaching himself for 2 years, staying up late in the apartment while his mama worked the night shift cleaning offices downtown. 15 minutes into class, Mr. Whitmore wrote a problem on the board. "Who can solve this?" Silence. The problem was complex, multi-step equation with variables on both sides. Malcolm raised his hand. Bradford snorted. "This should be entertaining." Malcolm stood up and walked to the board. He could feel every eye on him, could feel Bradford's smirk burning into his back. could feel the weight of being the only black kid in a room full of people waiting for him to fail. He picked up the chalk and started writing. 45 seconds later, he set the chalk down. The equation was solved correctly. Mr. Whitmore's eyebrows went up. Well done. Very well done. Malcolm walked back to his seat. Bradford's smirk had faded into something harder, something colder. Lucky guess, Preston worded. But it wasn't luck. The next day, Malcolm scored the highest grade on the history quiz. The day after that, he turned in an English essay that Mr. Harrison read out loud to the class as an example of excellent work. By the end of the first week, Malcolm had solved a mathematics problem that even Mr. Whitmore had to work through twice. Every success felt like a small victory, like proof that he belonged here despite what the whispers said. What Malcolm didn't understand yet was that every time he succeeded, every time he proved he was just as smart or smarter than the kids who had a private tutor since kindergarten, he wasn't earning respect. He was earning enemies.
Bradford stopped smiling at him. Preston stopped pretending to be friendly, and Jeremy started looking away whenever Malcolm made eye contact. On Friday of that first week, Malcolm went to his locker to grab his books for afternoon classes. The locker was empty. Everything was gone. His textbooks, his notebooks, the lunch his mama had packed that morning. Malcolm stood there staring at the empty metal space, his chest tight. "That's weird," a voice said behind him. Bradford stood there with Preston, both of them wearing expressions of fake concern. "Someone must have taken your stuff," Bradford continued. "That's terrible. Who would do something like that?" Malcolm looked at Bradford's face, at the way his eyes didn't match his words, at the small smile trying not to break through. He knew exactly who would do something like that, but he had no proof. And even if he did, would anyone believe the scholarship kid over Bradford Hancock, whose family had donated an entire library wing to Ashford? Malcolm closed his locker, without saying a word. "You should report it. Really, that's just wrong." Malcolm walked away. He could hear them laughing quietly once he was far enough down the hall. That night, he didn't tell his mama what happened. She'd worked a double shift at the hospital cafeteria and came home so tired she could barely stand. The last thing she needed was more problems. Malcolm did his homework using books he borrowed from the library. He rewrote his notes from memory, and he made himself a promise. Whatever they did to him, he wouldn't quit, wouldn't give them the satisfaction. He had no idea that things were about to get so much worse. Because Bradford Hancock didn't just want Malcolm to struggle. He wanted Malcolm gone. And people like Bradford always got what they wanted. At least, that's what Bradford thought. The books showing up in the trash wasn't an accident. Neither was Malcolm's homework ending up soaked in the bathroom sink, or his gym clothes disappearing right before PE class, forcing him to sit out while Mr. Reynolds gave him a lecture about being prepared. Malcolm started keeping everything in his backpack, never left it unattended, never gave them another chance. So, they got creative. Someone spray painted "scholarship fraud" across his gym locker in big red letters. The janitor cleaned it off, but not before half the school saw it. Not before Malcolm had to walk past it 3 times, feeling smaller with each step. Teachers started asking questions that felt like accusations dressed up as concern. "Malcolm, did you really write this essay yourself?" Mrs. Harrison asked, holding up his paper on the American Revolution. "Yes, ma'am." "It's very sophisticated for a 7th grader. Very advanced vocabulary." "I like to read." She looked at him for a long moment. "Well, just make sure all your work is your own." Malcolm wanted to scream, Wanted to ask if she questioned the other kids like this. Wanted to point out that Bradford had turned in an essay that sounded like it came straight from Wikipedia and nobody questioned him.
But he just said yes, ma'am, and took his A-. Should have been an A. Would have been an A if his last name was Hancock. At lunch, Malcolm sat alone. Not because he wanted to, because the one time he tried to sit at a table with other kids, they'd all suddenly remembered they needed to be somewhere else. So he sat by himself and did his homework and pretend that he didn't notice the way people stared. His mama noticed something was wrong. Mothers always do. "How's school, baby?" she asked one night while making dinner. Rice and beans, because that's what they could afford. "It's fine." "Malcolm?" He looked up. Patricia Rivers might have been exhausted from working 2 jobs, might have had dark circles under her eyes and hands rough from cleaning chemicals, but she wasn't stupid. "It's fine, Mama, really. Just adjusting." She studied his face. "Those kids giving you trouble?" "No more than expected." That answer seemed to hurt her worse than if he'd said yes. "Baby, if it's too much..." "It's not." Malcolm's voice came out harder than he meant. "I can handle it." Patricia nodded slowly. She didn't look convinced, but she let it go. Malcolm went back to his homework. He didn't tell her about the locker graffiti, didn't tell her about eating lunch alone every day, didn't tell her that sometimes he locked himself in a bathroom stall between classes just to have 60 seconds where nobody was staring at him. He especially didn't tell her about Bradford and Preston. They turned bullying into an art form. Never anything big enough to report, nothing a teacher would take seriously, just constant, grinding pressure designed to make Malcolm feel like he didn't belong. "Hey, Malcolm, nice shoes," Bradford said one day, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Are those from Payless?" Laughter. "Malcolm, my dad's company's hiring. You know, for when your mom needs a 3rd job." More laughter. Jeremy Chen stood nearby, looking uncomfortable. But he never said anything. Never told them to stop, just looked away and pretended he didn't hear. Silence Malcolm was learning was just another form of agreement. But Malcolm could handle the words. Words were just air. Words couldn't actually hurt you if you didn't let them. Then came the science fair announcement. Mr. Peterson stood at the front of the science class explaining the rules. Every 7th grader had to complete a project. It was worth 30% of their grade. The best projects would compete at the regional level. Malcolm's brain immediately started working. This was his chance, a chance to prove himself with something that couldn't be questioned or dismissed. Science didn't care about your zip code. Results were results. He started planning that night. He'd read about water filtration systems, how expensive they were, how many communities couldn't afford clean water. What if he could build a low-cost system using materials anyone could get? What if he could help people like the families in his neighborhood who still had to buy bottled water because the pipes were full of lead? For 3 months, Malcolm worked on his project. He spent every spare dollar from his small allowance on materials. He worked in the science lab after school. The next morning, Malcolm walked into the science lab at 7 a.m. and his world ended. The filtration system was destroyed, smashed into pieces on the floor. His research notes were torn into confetti and scattered across the tables. His presentation board was ripped in half. Written across or remained of his board in thick black marker were 5 words. "Go back where you came from." Malcolm stood frozen. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at 3 months of work reduced to garbage. Oh my God. Mr. Peterson appeared behind him, staring at the destruction. "Malcolm, what happened?" "I don't know." His voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from someone else. "This is serious. We need to report this. We need to find out who did this." But Malcolm already knew who did it. He'd seen Bradford and Preston whispering in the hallway yesterday, seen the way they'd looked at his project, seen Jeremy glance at him and then quickly look away. He knew. But knowing and proving were two different things. The school made a big show of caring. Principal Ashford himself came to the science lab. So did the head of security. They took photos of the destroyed project. They asked Malcolm questions while he sat there numb, barely able to form words. "Did you see anyone suspicious last night when you left?" "No, sir." "Any idea who might have done this?" Malcolm looked at Mr. Peterson, at Principal Ashford, at these men who ran a school where kids like Bradford could do anything they wanted without consequences. "No, sir." It was easier than the truth. The truth required proof. The truth required people to believe that Bradford Hancock, whose grandfather had founded Ashford Prep, would destroy another student's science project out of jealousy. They wouldn't believe it. Or worse, they would believe it and wouldn't care. "We'll review the security footage," Principal Ashford said. "We take vandalism very seriously at Ashford." Except there were no cameras in the science lab. Malcolm already knew that. Whoever destroyed his project knew that too. 2 days later, Principal Ashford called Malcolm into his office. "I'm afraid we haven't found any evidence of who vandalized your project," he said, leaning back in his leather chair. "We know witnesses, no footage, nothing concrete." "So that's it. Nothing happens." "We can't punish someone without proof, Malcolm. I'm sure you understand. However, we're willing to give you an extension. You can submit a new project next month for partial credit." Partial credit. For 3 months of work destroyed by someone who would face zero consequences. "What about the racist message?" Malcolm heard himself ask. "Someone wrote 'Go back where you came from' on my board. Doesn't that matter?" Principal Ashford's expression tightened. "That's a very serious accusation. Are you certain it was racially motivated? It could have been random vandalism." "Random vandalism with a racist message?" "Malcolm, I understand you're upset, but we need to be careful about making accusations we can't support. This school has a zero-tolerance policy for racism, but we also have a zero-tolerance policy for false allegations." The message was clear. Drop it, move on, don't make this a problem. Malcolm left the office feeling like he'd been punched in the stomach. The science fair happened that Friday. Bradford's solar energy project sat in the spot where Malcolm's filtration system should have been. It was polished, professional, the kind of project that looked like an adult had done most of the work. Malcolm walked through the fair with his hands in his pockets, looking at projects that other kids got to present, projects that nobody had destroyed. "Malcolm!" Mr. Peterson found him near the exit. "I'm so sorry about what happened. Your project was the best one here. Everyone knew it." "It doesn't matter now." "It does matter. Don't let this break you. You're talented. One step back doesn't change that." Malcolm nodded. But inside, he was learning a different lesson. Talent didn't matter if people could just destroy what you built. Hard work didn't matter if the game was rigged from the start.
The award ceremony was in the auditorium. Malcolm sat in the back row, wanting to leave but knowing his absence would be another kind of defeat. Third place went to Jeremy Chen's magnetism project. He walked up on stage looking uncomfortable, like he knew he didn't deserve to be there. Second place went to Preston Caldwell's plant growth experiment. He grinned and waved like he'd actually accomplished something. First place went to Bradford Hancock. Of course it did. Bradford walked across the stage with a smile that could have lit the room. He shook Principal Ashford's hand. He held up his trophy. And then, while everyone was clapping, he looked directly at Malcolm and smiled. Not the fake smile he used on teachers. Not the charming smile he showed to other students. This was something else. Something cold and satisfied. A smile that said, "I won. You lost. And there's nothing you can do about it." Malcolm stared back. He didn't clap, didn't move, just locked eyes with Bradford and let that moment burn into his memory. "You think this is over," he thought. "You think you won." But this wasn't over. Malcolm didn't know how yet, didn't know when.
But someday Bradford Hancock would understand exactly what he'd done today. The assembly ended. Students filtered out, chattering about weekend plans and upcoming tests. Normal things. Things that mattered in their normal lives. Malcolm walked home alone. It was a 40-minute walk from Ashford to Eastside. 40 minutes to think about everything that had happened. Everything he'd lost. The apartment was empty when he got there. His mama wouldn't be home until after midnight. Double shift at the hospital, then cleaning offices downtown. Malcolm sat at the kitchen table in the dark. He didn't turn on the lights, didn't eat, didn't do homework. He just sat there and let himself feel something he'd been pushing down for months. Hopelessness. What was the point? He could be twice as smart as Bradford, could work twice as hard, could do everything right, and it wouldn't matter. Because people like Bradford had power, had protection, had a system designed to make sure they won, and people like Malcolm lost. For the first time since getting the acceptance letter to Ashford, Malcolm cried. Not quiet tears, real sobs that shook his whole body. 3 months of holding it together. 3 months of pretending the stares and whispers didn't hurt. 3 months of being strong. It all came out. He cried for the destroyed project, for eating lunch alone every day, for his mama working herself to death so he could go to a school where nobody wanted him, for being 12 years old and already understanding that the world wasn't fair and never would be. That's how Patricia found him when she got home at 11:45 p.m. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen, still wearing her cleaning company uniform, looking at her son crying at the table. "Baby," she said quietly, "what happened?" And Malcolm told her everything. All of it. The bullying, the casual cruelty, the destroyed project, Bradford's smile, the investigation that went nowhere, the feeling that no matter what he did, he would never be good enough to overcome where he came from. "I want to quit," he said, his voice raw from crying. "I want to go back to Eastside. I don't belong at Ashford, Mama. I don't belong there." Patricia set down her bag. She walked over to the sink and washed her hands, hands that were rough and cracked from chemicals and hard work. Then she sat down across from Malcolm. Her eyes were tired, always tired, but there was something else in them too. Something fierce and unbreakable. "You listen to me, Malcolm Rivers." Patricia's voice was quiet, but it cut through the kitchen like a blade. "Those boys, they're scared of you. You know why?" "I'm not scary, Mama. I'm just a poor kid they like to mess with." "No, baby."
I'm just tired. Tired of fighting a fight I can't win. Patricia reached across the table and took his hand. "I know you're tired. I'm tired too. You think I want to be cleaning toilets at midnight? You think I dreamed about working 2 jobs just to keep us in a 1-bedroom apartment?" "Mama, but we don't get to quit, Malcolm. We don't get to just be average and still succeed. We have to be twice as good to get half as much. That's not fair. That's not right. But that's the truth of the world we live in." Malcolm looked at their joined hands, his mama's hands that had worked for everything he had, hands that never stopped moving, never stopped fighting. "You want to quit?" Patricia continued. "Fine. Come back to Eastside. Get an average education at an average school, work an average job. Let those boys win. Let them spend the rest of their lives thinking they broke you, thinking they were right about you all along." Her grip tightened. "Or you stay, you work harder than them, you become so successful they can't ignore you. You make them remember your name for the rest of their lives, not as the scholarship kid they bullied, but as the man who became everything they were supposed to be and never could." Malcolm felt something shift in his chest. Anger maybe, or determination. Or maybe just a simple refusal to let Bradford Hancock win. How? How do I beat people who can destroy what I build and face no consequences? You rebuild. Better than before. You enter that project in the regional competition, you win. You keep winning until they can't pretend you don't exist anymore. The science fair is over. The school science fair is over. But there are other competitions. Bigger ones. Better ones. Competitions where the Hancock name doesn't mean anything, where results are all that matter. Patricia stood up and walked to the junk drawer. She pulled out a stack of papers, printouts from the library computer about regional and national science competitions. I've been researching, been planning for when you were ready to talk about it, waiting for you to decide what kind of man you're going to be. You knew about the bullying? Baby, I'm your mama. Of course I knew. I was waiting for you to be ready to talk about it, waiting for you to decide what kind of man you're going to be. What if I rebuild the project and someone destroys it again? Then you rebuild it again and again until they understand that you can't be broken. Malcolm looked at the competition information, at his mama standing there in her cleaning uniform at midnight, ready to help him fight. At the choice in front of him, quit or fight, give up or stand up, let Bradford win or make him regret ever learning his name. Okay, Malcolm said quietly, I'll rebuild it. Not just rebuild it, baby. Make it better. Make it so good they can't ignore it. Make it so good that when you win, and you will win, everyone will know Bradford Hancock stole first place from a superior project. They stayed up until 3 in the morning. Patricia made coffee and pulled out Malcolm's old sketches from memory. Malcolm had studied his project so many times he could recreate it, most of it from scratch. But they didn't just recreate it, they improved it. What if we added a secondary filtration stage here? Patricia suggested, pointing to the design. That would increase efficiency by at least 15%. Then do it. Don't just beat them, Malcolm. Destroy them at their own game. By the time the sun came up, they had a complete redesign. Better flow rate, lower cost, more scalable. The original project was good. This one was exceptional. Malcolm looked at his mama, who hadn't slept, who had to work another shift in 4 hours. Why are you helping me like this? You could have just let me quit. Would have been easier for both of us. Patricia smiled. It was tired but genuine. Because I didn't work 2 jobs and sacrifice everything so my son could learn to give up when things get hard. I did it so you could learn to win. Now, get some sleep. You have school in 3 hours. You have work in 4 hours. I'll sleep when I'm dead. You need to be sharp. Can't rebuild a science project if you're falling asleep in class. Malcolm went to his room but couldn't sleep. His mind was already working on the project, on the timeline, on how to make this work. On Monday morning, he walked into Ashford with his head up. Bradford and Preston were waiting by his locker. They always were. Rough weekend, Malcolm? Bradford asked with fake sympathy. I heard your project had some problems. Malcolm looked him dead in the eye. I'm rebuilding it for the regional competition. Bradford's smile flickered. Good luck with that charity case. I don't need luck, Malcolm said. His voice was calm, cold. I have something better. Oh yeah? What's that? I have nothing to lose. You have everything to lose. Think about that. Malcolm walked past him. He could feel their eyes on his back, but he didn't care. Let them watch. Let them worry. Let them wonder what he was planning. Because Malcolm Rivers had just learned the most important lesson of his life. The lesson his mama taught him at that kitchen table. Success wasn't just about escaping poverty or proving yourself. Success was about becoming so undeniable that the people who tried to break you the rest of their lives watching you rise while they stayed exactly where they were. Bradford thought destroying one project meant he'd won. He had no idea he'd just created his own worst nightmare. Malcolm built his new water filtration system in the basement of his apartment building, not the science lab at Ashford. He wasn't giving anyone another chance to destroy his work. The basement was dark and smelled like mildew, but it had a workbench the maintenance man let him use and a door that locked. Every day after school, Malcolm went straight to the basement. He worked until his mama came home from her first shift. They'd eat dinner together, then she'd leave for her night job, and Malcolm would go back to the basement and work until midnight. He scrounged materials from hardware stores, recycling centers, anywhere he could find parts cheap or free. The project had to be low cost. That was the whole point. If he couldn't build it with materials anyone could access, it wouldn't help the communities that needed it most. 6 weeks. That's all he had until the regional STEM competition. At school, Branford and Preston watched him like hawks. "Still working on your little project?" Branford asked one day in the cafeteria. "Yeah." "Waste of time. You're just going to embarrass yourself." Malcolm didn't respond, didn't take the bait, just ate his lunch and went back to class. Jeremy Chen started sitting near Malcolm in some classes, not talking to him, not defending him, just there, like he wanted to say something but couldn't figure out how. Malcolm ignored him too. Silence wasn't neutral. Silence was a choice. Jeremy had made his choice months ago. The night before the regional STEM competition, Patricia came to the basement to see the finished project. Malcolm watched her face as she examined the filtration system, the way her eyes moved over each component, the way she tested the flow rate by running tap water through it. The water came out clear. Clean. 98% of contaminants removed. "Baby," she said quietly, "this is incredible." "You think it's good enough?" "I think those judges are going to lose their minds." The regional STEM competition was held at the University of Connecticut. Malcolm had never been to a college campus before. The buildings were huge. The students walking around looked so much older, so much more sure of themselves. He set up his project in the gymnasium alongside 40 other middle school students from across the state. His display looked humble compared to some of the others. No fancy printed banners, no expensive presentation boards, just his project, his research, and the truth. The judges came around at 2 p.m. There were 3 of them, 2 professors from the university and the woman who worked for the EPA. They stopped at each project, asked questions, took notes. When they got to Malcolm's table, he took a breath and started his presentation. He explained the problem, how millions of people globally didn't have access to clean water, how existing filtration systems were too expensive for poor communities, how he designed the system using common materials that anyone could replicate for under $50. Then he demonstrated it. He poured dirty water, mixed with food coloring, dirt, and salt, into the top of the system. 30 seconds later, clean water came out the bottom. The EPA woman picked up the output water and examined it. "How much of the contamination does this remove?" 98% of common contaminants, ma'am. I've tested it with bacteria, heavy metals, and chemical pollutants. The results are in my research documentation. The professors flipped through his notes. Pages and pages of testing data, charts, graphs, all done by hand because Malcolm didn't have access to the computer programs the rich kids used. "This is remarkable work," one of the professors said, "especially for a 7th grader. Did you have help building this?" Here it was. The question that always came, the assumption that he couldn't have done this alone. "My mother helped me research competition rules and encouraged me to improve my original design. All technical work and testing was done by me." Your original design? Malcolm hesitated, then decided to tell the truth. "I built a version of this for my school science fair. Someone destroyed it the night before the competition, so I rebuilt it. Better than before." The judges exchanged glances. The EPA woman wrote something in her notes. "Well, whoever destroyed your first project did you a favor. This version is exceptional." They moved on to the next table. Malcolm stood there, heart pounding, not letting himself hope. The award ceremony was at 5 p.m. 3rd place went to a girl from Hartford with the robotics project. 2nd place went to a boy from New Haven who designed an app for tracking air quality. 1st place was announced last. Malcolm Rivers from Ashford Preparatory Academy for his low-cost water filtration system designed for underserved communities. Malcolm walked up to the stage in a daze. The trophy was heavy in his hands, real. Proof that merit could matter if you got far enough away from people like Bradford Hancock. The EPA woman shook his hand. "I meant what I said earlier. This is exceptional work. Have you thought about entering the state competition?" "There's a state competition?" She smiled. "There is now. I'm going to make sure you get an invitation." Malcolm called his mama from a payphone outside the gymnasium.
"I won," he said when she answered. "Mama, I won." He heard her crying on the other end of the line. "I knew you would, baby. I knew you would." The state competition was 3 months later. Malcolm won that too. Then nationals in Washington, D.C. He'd never been on a plane before, had never left Connecticut. The foundation running the competition paid for everything: flight, hotel, meals. Malcolm stood in front of judges from MIT, Stanford, and Caltech. Stood in front of people who could change his entire future. And he was 18 years old. Malcolm Rivers was invited to present his water filtration system at an international STEM conference, the youngest presenter in the event's history. Articles were written about him. Teen genius designed solution for global water crises. Local news interviewed him and Patricia in their small apartment. Bradford saw those articles. Malcolm knew because Bradford's bullying stopped. Not out of respect, out of calculation. You couldn't openly mock someone the news was calling a genius without looking like a fool. But the resentment didn't stop. It just went underground. High school was 4 years of silent warfare. Malcolm took every advanced class Ashford offered. Perfect grades in AP Chemistry, AP Physics, AP Calculus. He joined the debate team and destroyed opponents with facts and logic. He tutored other students in math and science, building relationships with kids who saw him as smart instead of different. Bradford coasted. Good enough grades maintained by expensive tutors. Varsity lacrosse because his father had played varsity lacrosse. Leadership positions in clubs his family had funded. Preston followed Bradford like always. Jeremy got quieter, more withdrawn, like he was trying to disappear. SAT scores came back junior year. Malcolm scored 1,600. Perfect score. Bradford scored 1,420. Good score. Great score for most people, but not perfect. Not better than the scholarship kid. College acceptance letters arrived senior year. Malcolm got into MIT with a full scholarship, full ride, everything paid for. The admissions letter specifically mentioned his water purification research and invited him to continue developing it in their engineering program. Bradford got into Yale. Legacy admission. His father and grandfather had both gone to Yale. The family had donated enough money over the years to guarantee acceptance regardless of grades or scores. Preston got into Cornell. Jeremy got into Columbia. They were all going to prestigious schools, all going to be successful by conventional standards. But only one of them had earned it. Graduation day, Malcolm stood on stage as valedictorian. He gave a speech about perseverance and merit and never letting anyone tell you that you don't belong. Bradford sat in the audience with his family. I saw him whispering something to Preston. Saw them both smirk. Let them smirk. Let them think this was the end of the competition. They had no idea it was just beginning. Because Malcolm had learned something important over the past 6 years. Success wasn't a moment. It was a long game. And he was just getting started. At MIT, Malcolm didn't just study engineering. He dominated it. Top of his class every semester. Research positions with professors who were changing the world. Patents filed before he was 21. His water filtration system evolved. What started as a 7th grade science project became sophisticated technology backed by real research and development. Technology that companies wanted to license. Technology that could actually change lives. Malcolm graduated MIT at 22 with dual degrees in mechanical engineering and environmental science. Job offer. His assistant handed him a folder. This one might be interesting. Mid-sized firm, strong client base, struggling with leadership and innovation. Could be a good fit. Malcolm opened the folder. The company name at the top made him stop breathing. Hancock Industries. CEO, Bradford Hancock. Malcolm stared at that name for a long time. Then he started reading the financial reports, the performance reviews, the internal assessments. Everything confirmed what he suspected. The company was failing. Not dramatically, but slowly. Death by 1,000 small failures. By prioritizing connections over competence, by promoting friends instead of talent. Bradford had inherited the company from his father 5 years ago. In those 5 years, he'd driven it into the ground. And now, Malcolm held Bradford's future in his hands. He picked up his phone and called the acquisitions team. Hancock Industries. I want a full analysis by Friday and schedule an in-person meeting with their executive team. I'll lead it personally. When would you like to meet? Malcolm smiled. Not a nice smile, a smile that had been 20 years in the making. Next Tuesday, 10 a.m. Tell them Quantum Dynamics is very interested in acquisition. Tell them our CTO specifically requested this meeting. Should we mention your name? No. Let it be a surprise. Malcolm spent the weekend preparing. Not preparing his presentation, that was already done. The acquisition analysis was solid. Hancock Industries was a failing company held together by old client relationships and family reputation. Quantum Dynamics could buy it, strip out the incompetent leadership, and turn it profitable within a year. No, Malcolm was preparing himself. 20 years. 20 years since Bradford destroyed his science project. 20 years since he'd been called charity case and made to feel like he didn't belong. Malcolm had fantasized about this moment before. Late at night when he couldn't sleep, during long flights to conferences, in quiet moments when old wounds ached. He'd imagined Bradford bankrupt, humiliated, destroyed. But now that the moment was actually here, Malcolm felt something different. Not rage, not even satisfaction yet. Just cold, clear purpose. Sunday night, he called his mama. "Baby, you sound different," Patricia said. "What's going on?" "You remember Bradford Hancock?" Silence on the other end. Then, "The boy who destroyed your project. My company is acquiring his company. I'm leading the meeting on Tuesday." Lord have mercy. Patricia's voice went quiet. "How do you feel?" "Honestly, I don't know yet." "Malcolm, listen to me. You've worked too hard to let that boy make you into something you're not. You hear me? You can be successful without being..."
I'm not planning to be cruel, Mama. Just honest. Honest can be cruel when you have all the power. Remember who you are. Remember who raised you. Malcolm closed his eyes. I know, Mama. Do you? Because revenge has a way of eating people up from the inside. You became successful to prove something to yourself, not to hurt that boy. He didn't just hurt me. He tried to break me. And he failed. You won, baby. You already won. Don't let him take anything else from you, not even your peace. They talked for another hour. About the acquisition. About what Malcolm hoped to accomplish. About the difference between justice and revenge. When Malcolm hung up, he sat in his apartment, a nice place in downtown Boston with floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that didn't come from thrift stores, and thought about his mama's words. She was right. He had won. But Bradford didn't know that yet. Tuesday morning arrived cold and clear. Malcolm dressed carefully. A custom-tailored suit that cost $3,000, Italian leather shoes, a watch his company had given him when he made CTO. He looked like success, like power, like everything Bradford's money was supposed to guarantee but couldn't buy. The Quantum Dynamics team met him in the lobby at 9:30 a.m. The Hancock Industries executives are already in the conference room, his assistant told him. They seem nervous. They should be. They walked into the building together. Malcolm's building now, technically. Quantum Dynamics owned the lease. The receptionist recognized him. Good morning, Mr. Rivers. Conference room A is ready. Thank you. Give us 5 minutes, then send in the Hancock team. Malcolm walked into the conference room.
floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor, a table that could seat 20 people, screens on the walls ready to display the acquisition presentation. He stood at the window, looking out at the city. 20 years ago, he'd been eating lunch alone in a school cafeteria, wondering if he'd ever belong anywhere. Now he owned rooms like this. "They're ready," his assistant said from the doorway. "Send them in." Malcolm turned around, hands in his pockets, face neutral. The door opened. Bradford Hancock walked in first. He was 42 now, same as Malcolm, but he'd aged differently. Softer around the middle, harder around the eyes. The easy confidence of youth had curdled into the defensive arrogance of someone who knew his best days were behind him. He wore an expensive suit that didn't fit quite right, like he'd gained weight and hadn't bothered to get it tailored. Preston Caldwell came in behind them. Thinner, nervous energy. He kept
Jeremy Chen was last. He looked the most different. Quiet. Tired. Like life had worn him down in ways that have nothing to do with aging. All three of them stopped dead when they saw Malcolm. The recognition wasn't immediate. 20 years changed people. Malcolm had filled out, grown into his frame, wore his success like armor. But then Bradford's eyes widened. "Malcolm Rivers," he said slowly, like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. Malcolm didn't smile, didn't extend his hand, just stood there and let the moment breathe. Bradford Hancock, his voice was professional, cool. "It's been a long time." Preston stared. Wait, Malcolm from Ashford? The Schuylership? He cut himself off. Even Preston had enough sense not to finish that sentence. "The same." Malcolm gestured to the chairs around the table. "Please, sit. We have a lot to discuss." They sat like students called to the principal's office. Uncertain, uncomfortable. Malcolm remained standing. "I assume you've reviewed the preliminary acquisition terms we sent over. Quantum Dynamics is prepared to acquire Hancock Industries for $47 million. That's a fair price given your current market position and financial performance." Bradford's face was reddening. "We haven't agreed to any acquisition. This was supposed to be an exploratory meeting." "It is. We're exploring whether your company has enough value to justify the acquisition price. So far, I'm not convinced." He clicked the button. The screens lit up with financial data. Hancock Industries' performance over the past 5 years. Every metric told the same story: decline. "Revenue down 18% since you took over as CEO," Malcolm said. "Customer retention down 23%. Employee turnover up 42%. 3 of your largest clients switched to competitors in the last 18 months alone." He clicked to the next slide. "Your innovation pipeline is empty. No new patents filed in 4 years. No significant R&D investments. You're coasting on client relationships your father built while slowly losing ground to more competitive firms." Bradford stood up. "This is insulting. We came here in good faith. Sit down." The command was quiet but absolute. Malcolm's voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. Bradford sat. "You came here because your company is failing and you need a buyout. Quantum Dynamics is offering you one. But let's be clear about the terms." Another slide. Organizational restructuring. "Current executive leadership will be dissolved. All C-suite positions will be reevaluated. Anyone who can demonstrate value to the new organization will have the opportunity to interview for available positions." "Interview?" Preston's voice cracked. "We'd have to interview for jobs at our own company?"
"It's not your company anymore. It's mine. Or it will be once this acquisition closes." Jeremy finally spoke up. "Malcolm, we went to school together. Surely that counts for something." Malcolm looked at him, really looked at him. Jeremy Chen, who had watched Bradford and Preston bully him for years and never said a word, who'd looked uncomfortable but stayed silent, who'd chosen comfort over courage every single time. "It counts for exactly nothing," Malcolm said. "This is business, and in business, results matter. Not where you went to school, not who your family is, not how long you've known each other. Results." He clicked to the final slide. Performance metrics, standards, expectations. Quantum dynamics operates on merit. You produce or you leave. You contribute or you're gone. There's no room for nepotism or mediocrity. Bradford's hands were clenched on the table. "This is revenge. That's what this is. You're still bitter about some childhood." "Childhood what?" Malcolm's voice went cold. "Dangerous. Say it, Bradford. Some childhood what?" The room went silent. "You destroyed 3 months of my work the night before the science fair," Malcolm continued. His voice was quiet now, controlled. "You wrote, 'Go back where you came from,' on my presentation board. You spent years making me feel like I didn't deserve to exist in the same space as you. And you want to call that what, exactly? Kids being kids?" Bradford's face was pale. Preston looked at the table. Jeremy closed his eyes. "I'm not here for revenge," Malcolm said. "I'm here because your company is failing and mine can fix it. But make no mistake, I'm not saving you. I'm saving the 247 people who work for you and don't deserve to lose their jobs because you were too incompetent to run a company your father built." He closed his laptop. "The acquisition terms are non-negotiable. You have 72 hours to accept or decline. If you decline, we walk away, and you can watch Hancock Industries collapse on its own timeline instead of ours. Your choice." Malcolm walked toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. That water purification project you destroyed when we were 12? It's now providing clean water to 4 million people in 17 countries. My company is worth $2.3 billion, all because you made me angry enough to rebuild it better." He looked directly at Bradford. "So, maybe I should be thanking you." Malcolm walked out, leaving the three of them sitting in silence. His hands didn't start shaking until he got to the elevator. 20 years. 20 years of work and sacrifice and proving himself over and over. 20 years of being twice as good to get half as much. And it had all led to this moment. To 3 men who'd made his life hell sitting in a conference room he controlled, waiting for him to decide their futures.
Doors closed. Malcolm leaned against the wall and let himself feel it. Not satisfaction. Not yet. Victory. His phone buzzed. A text from Bradford's lawyer. "We need to discuss the terms. Mr. Hancock requests a private meeting." Malcolm typed back, "No private meetings. Accept the terms or walk away. You have 71 hours and 45 minutes. He put his phone away and smiled. For the first time in 20 years, Malcolm Rivers felt something he hadn't felt since he was 12 years old. Free. The call came 16 hours later. Malcolm was in his office reviewing employee files from Hancock Industries when his assistant knocked on the door. "Bradford Hancock is here. He says he needs to speak with you. No appointment." Malcolm didn't look up from the file he was reading. "Tell him I have nothing to say that wasn't said in yesterday's meeting." "He says it's urgent." "Then he should have made an appointment." 5 minutes later, his phone rang. Bradford's lawyer. "Mr. Rivers, my client is prepared to discuss modified terms." "The terms aren't negotiable. I was very clear about that." "Surely we can reach some accommodation. Mr. Hancock built that company." "Mr. Hancock's father built that company. Bradford inherited it and ran it into the ground. Now, do you want to accept our offer, or should I start looking at your competitors?" Silence on the other end. "We'll need more time to review." "You have 68 hours. After that, the offer expires." Malcolm hung up. His assistant appeared again. Mr. Hancock is still in the lobby. He's insisting. Call security if he doesn't leave in the next 5 minutes. Malcolm went back to the employee files. This was the important work, not Bradford's desperate attempts to negotiate, but understanding who actually kept Hancock Industries running despite incompetent leadership. The files told a clear story.
As senior engineer, 15 years with the company, 3 patents to her name. Salary hadn't increased in 6 years despite consistently excellent performance reviews. She'd applied for promotion to director level 4 times, rejected every time in favor of less qualified candidates who happened to be friends with Bradford. David Okonkwo, project manager, MBA from Northwestern, brought in 5 major clients in 3 years, also passed over for promotion. His file had a note from Bradford, not a cultural fit. Malcolm knew what that meant. Keisha Washington, head of R&D, PhD from Carnegie Mellon. Her research proposals kept getting rejected by Bradford for being too ambitious, while he approved projects from his college roommate that went nowhere. There were dozens more, talented people suffocating under leadership that valued loyalty over competence, people who deserved better. Malcolm made a list. These were the employees he'd keep, the ones he'd promote, the ones who'd actually earned their positions. Bradford, Preston, and Jeremy weren't on that list. At hour 48, Bradford's lawyer called again. My client accepts the acquisition terms with one condition. He remains as a consultant for 2 years to ensure smooth transition. No. Mr. Rivers, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. Bradford Hancock has demonstrated zero ability to lead his own company. Why would I pay him to consult on mine? Then what are you offering him? Same thing I'm offering every Hancock Industries employee, the opportunity to interview for available positions based on merit. That's unacceptable. Mr. Hancock is the CEO. Mr. Hancock was the CEO. Now he's unemployed unless he wants to interview like everyone else. Malcolm ended the call. His team was getting nervous. What if they walk away? His CFO asked. We've put significant resources into this acquisition. Then we put those resources into a different acquisition. There are other companies, but there's only one chance to do this right. At hour 48, Bradford accepted. The paperwork was signed. Quantum Dynamics officially acquired Hancock Industries. Malcolm personally reviewed every single employee. Sarah Martinez got promoted to VP of Engineering with a 40% salary increase. David Okonkwo became Director of Client Relations. Keisha Washington took over as Chief Innovation Officer with full authority over R&D budget. 23 other employees received promotions and raises, people who'd been held back by a system that rewarded connection over contribution. Bradford, Preston, and Jeremy received letters scheduling their interviews for positions 3 levels below where they'd been, with 60% pay cuts. Malcolm scheduled Bradford's interview personally. Bradford walked into Malcolm's office looking like he hadn't slept in days. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His face was drawn. "This is humiliating," he said, skipping any greeting. Malcolm gestured to a chair. "No. Humiliation is being 12 years old and having your project destroyed because people think you're inferior based on where you're from. This is just business. I have a family, a mortgage, private school tuition. I can't take a 60% pay cut." "Then don't. The door's right there." "But Bradford, let me tell you something."
Malcolm leaned back in his chair. "You taught me everything I needed to know about success. Not in the way you intended, but you taught me. I don't want to hear this. You're going to hear it anyway. When you destroyed my project, you taught me that the world doesn't care about fairness. It cares about results. You taught me that merit isn't enough, that I'd have to be twice as good to get half as much." Malcolm's voice was calm, matter of fact. "You taught me that hard work can be destroyed by people with power and privilege, that the game is rigged, that sometimes the bad guys win and face no consequences." Bradford's jaw tightened. "So I learned to play a different game. A game where I worked so hard and became so good that privilege couldn't touch me. Where results spoke louder than connections. Where merit mattered more than money." Malcolm stood and walked to the window. "I rebuilt that project you destroyed, made it better, won regional, state, and national competitions with it, turned it into a career. then a company, then a fortune. All because you made me angry enough to prove you wrong." He turned to face Bradford. "So thank you. Thank you for showing me that the old rules don't work for people like me. That I'd have to write new rules, better rules, rules based on what you can do, not who you know." Bradford's face was red. "You really are going to destroy my life over high school?" "I'm not destroying anything. I'm offering you a job, associate level, $85,000 a year, benefits. It's more than most people make, more than my mama made working 2 jobs when I was growing up." Malcolm's voice hardened. "Whether you succeed or fail in that position is entirely up to you. For the first time in your life, Bradford, you'll be judged on your actual abilities instead of your last name. Welcome to how the rest of us have always lived." Bradford stood up. "And if I say no? Then you say no. I'm not forcing you to work here, but I suspect you'll have trouble finding another executive position once word gets out about why Hancock Industries failed under your leadership. This is revenge." "No. Revenge would be buying your company and shutting it down just to watch you fail. This is justice. I'm saving the jobs of 247 people who don't deserve to suffer because you were incompetent." Malcolm walked to the door and opened it. "You have until Friday to decide. Accept the position or decline. Either way, I'm moving forward." Bradford walked out without another word. Preston's interview went similarly. He was offered a project coordinator position. Same pay cut, same demotion. He took it. Preston had always been a follower. He'd follow Malcolm's rules the same way he'd followed Bradford's. Jeremy's interview was different. He sat across from Malcolm and didn't make excuses, didn't try to negotiate, just looked tired and defeated.
"No, I don't deserve consideration," Jeremy said quietly. "I know what I did, what I didn't do. All those years watching Bradford and Preston bully you and never saying a word. Then why are you here?" "Because I need this job. Because I have a daughter and a mortgage and no other prospects. Because I'm asking for mercy I probably don't deserve." Malcolm studied him. "Why didn't you ever speak up, back at Ashford? You always looked uncomfortable, like you knew what was happening was wrong, but you never said anything." Jeremy looked down at his hands. "I was scared. Bradford's family had power, money. I thought if I stayed quiet, if I didn't make waves, I'd be safe. That I could just keep my head down and get through it." "And did it work? Did staying quiet keep you safe?" Jeremy laughed bitterly. "No. Bradford's been underpaying me for 5 years. Preston took credit for my work, but I stayed silent about that too. Turns out I'm really good at being silent when I should speak up. Then why should I hire you? Why should I trust someone who's made a career of staying silent when things get hard?" Jeremy met Malcolm's eyes. "Because I have a 7-year-old daughter, and last week she came home from school crying because some kids were making fun of her, calling her names because she's Chinese, and I didn't know what to tell her." His voice broke. "How do I tell her to stand up for herself when I never stood up for anyone? When I watched you get bullied and did nothing? When I let Bradford and Preston treat people like garbage for years because it was easier than fighting back?" Jeremy's hands were shaking. "I don't deserve this job, Malcolm. I know that. But I'm asking anyway. Not for me, for her. So I can look my daughter in the eye and tell her I finally learned to do the right thing." Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. Then he made a decision that surprised even himself. "The position is yours," Malcolm said. Jeremy's head snapped up. "What?" "Associate Director of Strategic Initiatives, $92,000 a year. You start Monday." I don't understand. After everything I just told you?" "You told me the truth. That matters. And Jeremy, I'm going to tell you something I learned from my mama." Malcolm leaned forward.
People who failed at doing the right thing and feel genuine remorse often become the fiercest advocates because they know what it costs to stay silent. They know what it feels like to live with that regret.
You're giving me a chance to be better. I'm giving you a chance to prove you mean what you say. But Jeremy, hear me clearly. If you stay silent when you see injustice again, you're gone. I don't accept complicity. Not in my company. I won't be silent, I swear to you. Good, because I'm putting you in charge of something important. Malcolm pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. Diversity Recruitment and Mentorship Program. I want you to find talented kids from communities that get overlooked. Kids from poor neighborhoods, kids of color, kids who are brilliant but don't have the connections or money to get noticed. Jeremy opened the folder. Inside were program proposals, budget allocations, partnership agreements with schools. This is a massive initiative. It's the most important initiative at this company. More important than any product we develop or any profit we make. Because if we can identify talented kids early and give them real opportunities, we can change entire trajectories. Malcolm's voice was intense now. I want you to make sure no kid has to go through what I went through. That no 12-year-old has to eat lunch alone because nobody wants to sit with a scholarship student. That no brilliant project gets destroyed because someone felt threatened. Why me? Why trust me with this after what I did? Because you have something the other candidates don't. You have a daughter who's facing discrimination. You have personal motivation to make sure the next generation doesn't inherit our failures. Malcolm stood and walked around the desk. Your daughter, what's her name? Lily. Lily is 7. In 5 years, she'll be 12. The age I was when Bradford destroyed my project. I want you to build a program so that when Lily is 12, if someone tries to break her, there are systems in place to protect her. Adults who speak up, consequences for bullies, support for victims. He wiped his eyes. I don't know what to say. Say you'll do the work. Say you'll be the person you wish you'd been 20 years ago. I will. I promise. Malcolm handed him another document. This is a list of schools in underserved communities. I want partnerships with all of them by the end of the year. Scholarships, mentorship programs, summer internships, the full pipeline from middle school through college. This is going to cost millions. I have millions. What I don't have is time. These kids need help now, not someday. Now. Jeremy looked at the list. Schools in neighborhoods like Eastside, communities where kids were brilliant but invisible, where potential died because nobody with power bothered to look. Malcolm, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why didn't you destroy Bradford? You had the power. You could have left him with nothing, but you gave him a job. A bad job, sure, but still a job. Why? Malcolm thought about his mama's words, about revenge eating people from the inside, about being successful without being cruel. Because destroying Bradford wouldn't help anyone. It wouldn't help the employees at Hancock Industries, wouldn't help the kids we're going to mentor, wouldn't help me. He looked out the window at the Boston skyline. Bradford's punishment isn't poverty. It's knowing that the kid he tried to break became the man who controls his future. It's working under me and seeing every day that merit matters more than money. That's justice. After Jeremy left, Malcolm sat alone in his office. Bradford had declined the job offer, sent a terse email saying he'd pursue other opportunities. Malcolm knew what that meant. Bradford would coast on family money and connections, will tell people the acquisition was a hostile takeover, would never admit he'd failed. That was fine. Malcolm didn't need Bradford's confession, didn't need his apology. He had something better.
He had the power to make sure the next Malcolm Rivers didn't face what he'd faced, that the next brilliant kid from a poor neighborhood got opportunities instead of obstacles. His phone rang. It was Sarah Martinez, the new VP of Engineering. "Mr. Rivers, I just wanted to thank you again. This promotion, it's everything I've worked for." "You earned it, Sarah. Now go prove why you deserved it years ago." "I will. And sir, the team is excited. The people Bradford able back, they're energized. They want to show what they can do." "Then let them. That's why we're here." After hanging up, Malcolm checked his calendar. Tomorrow he was speaking at Eastside Public School, the school he'd attended before Ashford. He was announcing a new scholarship program. Full tuition to Ashford Preparatory for 10 students every year, plus mentorship, support systems, everything Malcolm hadn't had. The circle was closing. 20 years ago, a 12-year-old boy had walked through iron gates feeling like he didn't belong. Now that boy, grown into a man, was making sure the next generation knew they belonged everywhere. His phone buzzed. A text from his mama. "Proud of you, baby. Not for the money or the power, for remembering where you came from." Malcolm smiled and texted back, "I learned from the best." Tomorrow he'd go back to Eastside, back to where the journey started, and he'd open doors that had been closed to him. Because revenge was temporary, but legacy was forever. Winter came to Boston with a vengeance. Malcolm stood at his office window watching snowfall over the harbor. 6 months since the Hancock Industries acquisition. 6 months since he'd walked into that conference room and faced the men who tried to break him. The company had transformed. Revenue was up 22%. Employee satisfaction scores had tripled. 3 major clients who'd left under Bradford's leadership had come back. The innovation pipeline that had been empty now had 12 active projects.
The engineering team had filed for 5 new patents. David Okonkwo had brought in 8 new clients. Keisha Washington's R&D department was developing technology that could revolutionize water purification in areas affected by climate change. The people Bradford had held back were soaring. But Malcolm's proudest achievement wasn't the profit margins or the stock price. It was the diversity initiative Jeremy Chen was building. Malcolm walked down to Jeremy's office. Through the glass walls, he could see Jeremy on a video call with someone, gesturing enthusiastically. Malcolm waited until a call ended, then knocked. "Got a minute?" Jeremy looked up and smiled. A real smile, not the uncomfortable, guilty expression he'd worn for 20 years. "Always. Come in." The office walls were covered with photos. Kids from the mentorship program, students who'd received scholarships, success stories. One photo caught Malcolm's eye. A young black girl, maybe 13, standing in front of a science fair display. "Who's that?" "Destiny Johnson, 7th grader from Dorchester. Brilliant kid. Won the regional science competition last month with a project on renewable energy storage." Malcolm looked closer at the photo. The girl's smile reminded him of himself at that age. Proud but guarded, like she was waiting for someone to tell her she didn't deserve to be there. "Tell me about her." Jeremy pulled up a file on his computer. "Single mom, works 2 jobs. Destiny got a full scholarship to a prep school through our program. She's the only black student in most of her classes." Sound familiar? It sounded very familiar. "How's she handling it?" "Struggling. Some of the other kids aren't exactly welcoming. Nothing overt, just the usual microaggressions. She called our mentorship hotline twice last week." Malcolm's jaw tightened. "What happened?" "Kids in her class questioned whether she wrote her own essay. Teacher asked if she needed extra help when she was getting straight A's. Someone wrote diversity hire on her locker." The same playbook. 20 years later and nothing had changed. Except this time, Destiny wasn't alone. "What did we do?" "I called the school personally, talked to the principal, explained that our scholarship comes with expectations about how our students are treated, that if they can't provide a safe, respectful environment, we'll pull our partnership and our funding." "And?" "The principal called an assembly, made it clear that discrimination wouldn't be tolerated.
The kids who wrote on Destiny's locker were suspended. The teacher who questioned her work was required to attend bias training.
No, I don't deserve consideration, Jeremy said quietly. I know what I did, what I didn't do. All those years watching Bradford and Preston bully you and never saying a word. Then why are you here? Because I need this job. Because I have a daughter and a mortgage and no other prospects. Because I'm asking for mercy I probably don't deserve. Malcolm studied him. Why didn't you ever speak up? Back at Ashford, you always looked uncomfortable, like you knew what was happening was wrong, but you never said anything. Jeremy looked down at his hands. I was scared. Bradford's family had power, money. I thought if I stayed quiet, if I didn't make waves, I'd be safe. That I could just keep my head down and get through it. And did it work? Did staying quiet keep you safe? Jeremy laughed bitterly. No! Bradford's been underpaying me for 5 years. Preston took credit for my work. But I stayed silent about that too. Turns out, I'm really good at being silent when I should speak up. Then why should I hire you? Why should I trust someone who's made a career of staying silent when things get hard? Jeremy met Malcolm's eyes. Because I have a 7-year-old daughter. And last week, she came home from school crying because some kids were making fun of her, calling her names because she's Chinese. And I didn't know what to tell her. His voice broke. How do I tell her to stand up for herself when I never stood up for anyone? When I watched you get bullied and did nothing? When I let Bradford and Preston treat people like garbage for years because it was easier than fighting back? Jeremy's hands were shaking. I don't deserve this job, Malcolm. I know that. But I'm asking anyway. Not for me, for her. So I can look my daughter in the eye and tell her I finally learned to do the right thing. Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. Then he made a decision that surprised even himself. The position is yours, Malcolm said. Jeremy's head snapped up. What? Associate Director of Strategic Initiatives, $92,000 a year. You start Monday. I don't understand. After everything I just told you. You told me the truth. That matters. And Jeremy, I'm going to tell you something I learned from my mama. Malcolm leaned forward. People who have failed at doing the right thing and feel genuine remorse often become the fiercest advocates because they know what it costs to stay silent. They know what it feels like to live with that regret.
Jeremy pulled up another document. But more importantly, we connected Destiny with 3 mentors, successful Black women in STEM who've been through exactly what she's going through. They talk to her weekly, remind her she's not alone, that she belongs there despite what anyone says. Malcolm felt something tight in his chest loosen. This was why he'd given Jeremy a second chance. Not because Jeremy deserved it, but because the next generation of kids like Destiny deserved someone who understood the cost of silence and refused to be silent anymore. How many kids are we supporting now? 47 across 6 schools. We're expanding to 10 schools next year. And Malcolm, the results are incredible. These kids are thriving, not just academically, emotionally. They have support systems, people who believe in them. Jeremy's voice got thick. My daughter Lily is in the program now too. Not because she needs financial help, but because I want her to grow up alongside kids from different backgrounds. Kids who'll teach her what I failed to learn until it was too late. What's that? That staying silent when you see injustice makes you part of the problem. That privilege means nothing if you don't use it to help others. Malcolm looked at the photos on the wall again.
47 kids who wouldn't have to fight alone the way he did. You're doing good work here, Jeremy. I'm trying to earn the second chance you gave me. Malcolm's phone buzzed. His assistant. Mr. Rivers, there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent. Bradford Hancock. Malcolm and Jeremy exchanged looks. I thought he left the state, Jeremy said. That's what I heard too. Malcolm walked back to his office. Bradford was in the lobby, looking worse than the last time Malcolm had seen him. His suit was cheaper, his face was drawn. He'd lost weight, but not in a healthy way. Bradford, this is unexpected. I need to talk to you. Malcolm considered saying no, considered having security escort him out, but curiosity won. 5 minutes. They went to Malcolm's office. Bradford was standing by the window looking out at the view he used to take for granted. I heard about your mentorship program, the scholarships, the support systems. And I wanted to say what you're doing is good, important. Those kids are lucky to have someone who understands what they're going through. Well, I've been doing some thinking over the past 6 months about Ashford, about what we did to you, what I did to you. We? Okay, what I did. I destroyed your project. I made your life hell because I was threatened by how smart you were, how hard you worked, because deep down, I knew you deserved to be there more than I did. Why are you telling me this now? Because I lost everything. The job, my marriage. My father won't speak to me because I embarrassed the family name. I'm living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Worcester, working as a consultant, making a third of what I used to make. Bradford's voice cracked. And the worst part? I deserve it. I built my entire life on connections instead of competence. When that wasn't enough anymore, I had nothing to fall back on. No real skills, no real achievements. Just a famous last name that doesn't mean anything when you failed. Is this an apology? I don't know if I have the right to apologize. How do you apologize for trying to break someone? For making a 12-year-old kid feel like he didn't deserve to exist? Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. You can't, he finally said. There's no apology that fixes what you did. No words that erase those years of humiliation.
Bradford nodded. I know. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did, what I was, and I'm sorry, even if that means nothing. Why does my forgiveness matter? You never cared about my opinion before? Because you won. You became everything I was supposed to be and never could. And instead of destroying me when you had the chance, you offered me a job. You gave Jeremy a second chance. You're helping kids who remind you of yourself. Bradford's voice dropped to a whisper. You're a better man than I ever was, and I needed you to know that I finally understand. What I destroyed wasn't just a science project. It was innocence, the belief that being smart and working hard was enough. I took that from you. Malcolm felt anger rise in his chest, anger he'd been holding for 20 years. You're right. You did take that from me. You taught me that the world was cruel and unfair, that privilege mattered more than merit, that people like you could destroy people like me and face no consequences. He walked closer to Bradford. But you know what else you taught me? That I had to be stronger than you, smarter than you, better than you in every way that actually matters. You made me fight for everything, and that fight made me who I am. Malcolm's voice hardened. So no, Bradford, I don't forgive you. I don't absolve you. What you did was wrong. It damaged me in ways I'm still working through. Your apology doesn't change that. Bradford's face crumpled. But, Malcolm continued, I also don't hate you anymore, because hating you gives you power over my life, and you don't deserve that power. He walked to the door and opened it. You asked if your apology means anything. It means you finally grew up. Congratulations. It only took you 30 years. Bradford walked to the door, then paused. The kids in your program, they're lucky. They get the version of Malcolm Rivers I never let myself see. The one who helps instead of hurts. Those kids earned that version. You didn't. Bradford nodded and left. Malcolm closed the door and sat at his desk. His hands were shaking, not from anger, from release. For 20 years, he'd carried Bradford's cruelty like weight. Carrying it had made him stronger, sure, but it had also been exhausting. Maybe it was time to put it down. His phone rang. Jeremy. Everything okay? I saw Bradford leave. Yeah, everything's fine. Actually, better than fine. What happened?
At the photo on his desk. Him and his mama at his MIT graduation. Both of them crying. Both of them understanding what that moment meant. I just realized something. Bradford already lost. He lost 20 years ago when he destroyed my project and I chose to rebuild it. Everything since then has just been him finally understanding what I already knew. Was that the best revenge isn't revenge at all, is living so well that the people who tried to break you become irrelevant to your story. Jeremy laughed. Your mama teach you that? She taught me everything that matters. After hanging up, Malcolm looked at his calendar. Tomorrow was the big day, the Eastside Public School Assembly, the official launch of the scholarship program that would send 10 kids a year to Ashford Prep. 10 kids who wouldn't face what he faced, who would have support and mentorship and people who believed in them. Malcolm opened his laptop and pulled up his speech notes. Tomorrow, he was going back to where it all started, and this time, he was bringing help. The gymnasium at Eastside Public School looked exactly the same. Malcolm stood in the doorway, hit by memories so vivid he could almost see his 12-year-old self sitting in these bleachers. Back when the world was simple. Back when he believed being smart was enough. Mr. Rivers? The principal, Mrs. Washington, approached with a warm smile. She was new since Malcolm's time here, but she knew his story. The students are so excited. We've never had someone like you come back. Someone who actually made it out and came back to help. This neighborhood gave me my foundation. It's time I gave something back. The bleachers were filling up. 6th, 7th, and 8th graders filing in, loud and energetic the way middle school kids always were. Malcolm saw himself in their faces, saw the potential, saw the brilliance that the world would try to convince them didn't exist. He also saw their parents in the back rows. Tired faces, working class people who'd taken time off from jobs they couldn't afford to miss because their kids had been told someone important was coming to speak. Malcolm recognized that exhaustion, had seen it in my mama's face every day for years. The assembly started. Mrs. Washington gave a brief introduction about Malcolm's achievements. MIT graduate, chief technology officer, inventor, philanthropist. The words sounded impressive, like someone else's life. Then Malcolm took the microphone. How many of you have been told you're smart? He asked. Every hand in the gymnasium went up. Good. Now keep your hand up if you've also been told that being smart isn't enough, that you need to work harder than everyone else, that you need to be twice as good to get half as much. Most of the hands stayed up, the black and brown kids especially. They knew. My name is Malcolm Rivers. I grew up in this neighborhood, went to this school, lived in the Eastside Gardens apartments until I was 18. He pointed to the building visible through the gymnasium windows. Building C, 3rd floor, apartment 3D. Me and my mama in a 1-bedroom. She worked 2 jobs. I studied and tried to stay out of trouble. The kids were listening now, really listening, because Malcolm wasn't some rich guy from somewhere else. He was one of them. When I was 12, I earned a scholarship to Ashford Preparatory Academy. Anyone heard of it? A few kids nodded. The fancy private school in Greenwich, the one that might as well be on another planet for kids from Eastside. I thought it was my chance. Thought if I worked hard enough, if I was smart enough, I'd belong there, that merit mattered. Malcolm paused. I was wrong. The first day someone called me a charity case. They destroyed my homework, wrote racist things on my locker, and when I built a science project, spent 3 months working on something I was proud of, they destroyed it the night before the competition.
The gymnasium was silent now. I went home that night and cried. Told my mama I wanted to quit, that I didn't belong at that school, that being smart wasn't enough. Malcolm's voice got stronger. But my mama, Patricia Rivers, who's sitting right there in the back, he pointed. Patricia waved, wiping her eyes. My mama told me something I want you all to hear. She said I had a choice. I could quit and let them win, let them spend the rest of their lives thinking they broke me. Or I could stay, work harder, become so successful they'd have to remember my name, not as the kid they bullied, but as the man who became everything they said I couldn't be. Malcolm walked closer to the bleachers. So I rebuilt that project, made it better, won regional, state, and national competitions with it, turned it into technology that now provides clean water to 4 million people in 17 countries, built a company worth billions of dollars, and last year, I bought the company owned by the same guy who destroyed my project 20 years ago. Murmurs went through the crowd, the parents especially. They understood what that meant. But I didn't come here to talk about revenge. I came here to talk about doors. Malcolm gestured to Mrs. Washington, who pulled up a presentation on the screen. The Malcolm Rivers Scholarship Program. Starting this year, 10 students from Eastside Public School will receive full scholarships to Ashford Preparatory Academy. Full tuition, books, supplies, everything. Gasps from the audience. But that's not all, because I know scholarships aren't enough. I know what it's like to walk into a place where you're the only one who looks like you, where people question whether you deserve to be there, where you eat lunch alone because nobody wants to sit with the poor kid. Malcolm's voice was passionate now. But every scholarship student also gets a mentor, someone who's been where you are, someone who understands the struggle. You'll have their phone number. You can call them anytime. 2 a.m. because you're scared? After school because someone said something racist? During lunch because you're sitting alone? They'll be there. He clicked to the next slide. You'll also have a support network. Other scholarship students. Kids going through the same thing. You won't be alone. Another slide. And if anyone at that school discriminates against you, if teachers question your work, if students harass you, if anyone makes you feel like you don't belong, you call me directly, my personal number, and I will handle it, because no kid should have to face what I faced alone. The gymnasium erupted in applause. Malcolm waited for it to quiet again. Now, some of you are probably thinking, why would I want to go to a school where people might treat me badly? Why not just stay here where it's comfortable?
A small hand raised in the third row. A girl, maybe 12, with her hair in braids. Mr. Rivers. Yes? What if they're mean to us? What if they laugh at us like they laughed at you? Malcolm smiled. They probably will be. People fear what they don't understand. They attack what threatens them. But here's what I learned. He knelt down to her level. Their meanness is proof that you matter, that you're a threat to their comfortable assumptions about who gets to be successful. Use that fear as fuel. Let their doubt become your motivation. He stood back up and addressed the whole room. 15 years from now, when you're sitting in boardrooms making decisions that affect thousands of people, remember this moment. Remember where you came from. Remember who believed in you when the world said you weren't good enough. Malcolm's voice was fierce now. And make sure you open doors for the next kid who needs them. Make sure the next Malcolm Rivers doesn't have to fight alone. That's how we change things. Not by getting ours and forgetting everyone else, but by reaching back and pulling others up. The applause was deafening. After the assembly, Malcolm stayed for 2 hours, talking to kids, hugging parents, answering questions about the program. One mother approached with tears streaming down her face. My son Marcus, he's so smart, but I can't afford to send him anywhere but here. This scholarship? Mr. Rivers, this is an answer to prayer. Malcolm hugged her. Make sure Marcus applies, and tell Marcus Rivers said he belongs just as much as anyone. As the gymnasium emptied,
Malcolm found his mama waiting by the door. "You did good, baby," Patricia said. "Real good. I learned from you." "No, you learned to survive from me. You learned to thrive all on your own." They walked outside together. The Eastside Gardens apartments loomed in the distance. Building C, third floor, apartment 3D, where it all started. "Mama, can I ask you something? That night when I wanted to quit, when I was crying at the kitchen table, did you know I'd actually do it? Actually stay and fight?" Patricia smiled. "I knew you'd do whatever you decided to do. My job wasn't to make the choice for you. It was to show you that you had a choice, that you weren't powerless. What if I had quit? Then you would have quit, and I would have loved you anyway. Success isn't just about money and titles, Malcolm. It's about becoming someone you're proud of, someone who uses their gifts to help others." Malcolm looked at the school, at the kids walking out with application forms for the scholarship program, at the parent. The message read, "She's going to MIT, full scholarship, just like you. The cycle continues." Malcolm showed his mama the photo. "Look at that smile," Patricia said. "That's what hope looks like." They stood there watching the sun set over Eastside, over the neighborhood that has shaped him, over the community he'd never forgotten. Malcolm thought about Bradford, about the apology that came 20 years too late, about the man who tried to break him and ended up forging him into something unbreakable. He thought about all the kids who would benefit from the scholarship program, all the Destinies and Marcuses who would get chances they deserved. And he thought about the truth he'd learned over 20 hard years. The best revenge wasn't destroying your enemies. It was living so well, so successfully, so completely on your own terms that they became footnotes in your story, minor characters in an epic they couldn't comprehend. Bradford Hancock had tried to write Malcolm out of the story. Instead, Malcolm had written himself into history. "Ready to go home?" Patricia asked. Malcolm took one last look at Eastside Public School, at the place where his journey began. "Yeah, Mama, I'm ready." They walked to the car together, mother and son. The woman who'd worked 2 jobs to give him a chance, and the man who'd turned that chance into a legacy. Behind them, the school lights turned off one by one. But for 10 kids every year, the lights were just turning on. And Malcolm Rivers, the boy they'd laughed at, the scholarship kid who didn't belong, the charity case who wasn't supposed to succeed, was the one flipping the switch. They laughed at him once. Now he was laughing last, not with cruelty, but with joy. The joy of a promise kept, a cycle broken, a future built. The joy of coming home. Malcolm Rivers was 12 years old when they laughed at him, called him a charity case, destroyed his dreams, tried to convince him he didn't belong. 20 years later, he walked into a boardroom and became their boss. But this story isn't really about revenge. Bigger. It's about a mother who worked 2 jobs and told her son that being twice as good to get half as much isn't fair, but it's the truth. It's about a boy who could have quit, but chose to rebuild. It's about turning pain into purpose and humiliation into legacy. If this story moved you, I need you to do something right now. Hit that like button. Smash it. Because that tells me you want more stories like this, real stories about real people who refuse to accept the limitations the world placed on them. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever been the only one who looked like you in a room? Has anyone ever tried to make you feel like you didn't belong? What's your science project? The dream someone tried to destroy? I read every single comment. Your stories matter here. And if you're new to TopCore, let me tell you what we do here. We don't tell fairy tales. We tell the truth, the uncomfortable truth about race in America, about class, about privilege and power, about people who were counted out and came back stronger. Hit that subscribe button right now because next week I'm bringing you a story that's going to shake you. It's about a black janitor who overheard something in a corporate bathroom that exposed a conspiracy reaching all the way to the top. What he did next cost him everything, but saved hundreds of lives. You won't want to miss it. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with the kid who's being bullied and thinks it'll never get better. Share it with the parent working 3 jobs, wondering if the sacrifice is worth it. Share it with anyone who's ever been told they're not good enough because of where they're from or what they look like. Because here's what Malcolm's story teaches us. Success isn't about becoming rich and forgetting where you came from. It's about becoming powerful and reaching back to pull others up. It's about opening doors that were closed to you so the next generation doesn't have to break them down alone. Malcolm could have destroyed Bradford Hancock, could have left them with nothing. Instead, he offered him a job. A humbling job, sure, but a job. Because the best revenge isn't cruelty. It's becoming so successful that your enemies become irrelevant to your story. Patricia Rivers worked 2 jobs and never quit. Malcolm Rivers rebuilt his project and never quit. The 47 kids in that mentorship program are fighting and never quitting. So what about you? What are you rebuilding? What are you fighting for? Who are you reaching back to help? This is Top Core, where we tell the stories mainstream media won't touch, where we talk about race and class and justice without apology, where we celebrate people who turn their pain into power. Every week, a new story. Every week, a new lesson. Every week, proof that the system is rigged, but people are breaking it anyway. Before you go, ask yourself Malcolm's question.
When you're sitting in your own boardroom 15 years from now, making decisions that affect thousands of people, will you remember where you came from? Will you open doors for the next kid who needs them? Because that's the real measure of success. Not how high you climb, but how many people you bring with you. I'll see you next week with another story that matters. This is Top Core, where every voice counts, where every struggle has meaning, where transformation isn't just possible,